I'm a senior instructor and master teacher in the UCCS Teach program. This is a training video for potential and current mentors who've agreed to work with our students who are currently in Classroom Interactions. Classroom Interactions, which we call CI, is the third field-based course in the UCCS Teach course sequence. During this video, I'm going to talk to you about your role as a mentor teacher, what's expected of the students who are in Classroom Interactions, and also what you can expect in the way of support from master teachers like myself in the program. You will work with probably a pair of our students in most cases. You'll also have a master teacher like myself that you work with that's going to provide the support for students along with you. So as I said, CI is the third field-based experience. Students have already been through step 1 in our program, which is where they go into an elementary school and teach 3 lessons. In step 2, they go into a middle school and they prepare and teach 3 lessons at a middle school level. Then they take Knowing and Learning, which is more of an ed psych class where they learn about how students learn, and they also gain some knowledge about teaching tools, different strategies that they can use with students. In step 1 and step 2, they're learning about inquiry-based instruction, different methodologies aligned to that. And also they learn how to create a lesson plan using the 5E lesson planning model, which you may or may not be familiar with, but you'll become familiar with it as you work with our students. And then they get to CI, which is the third experience, which, as you know, is they're going to be working with high school students. So they're about halfway through our program when they get through CI. So they've gained some field experience, but they're still very young teachers, still learning a lot. Just want you to be aware of this as you take them on. The expectation is that they're not consummate professionals yet. They're still learning, and you're helping us with that process. We believe that the field-based experiences are incredibly important for our students, and mentors play a major role in that. Classroom Interactions really changes the focus from the planning aspects of teaching to the student-teacher interactions and the relationships, both not professionally, but both in content related, but also socially, emotionally, that occur between and among the teachers and the students. We get more into the classroom dynamics as directed by the teacher and responded to with the student. We train them in a Class S observation system, and we'll give you copies of that so you see what it is. It aligns closely to the Colorado Teacher Quality Standards, and it really just contains the elements of good teaching that you all already know about. But it's a good thing to review because then you'll know what we've trained the students in, what we've talked to them about, and it'll help you with conversations that you can have with the students after they've spent time in your classroom. Students are expected to do 6 hours of observation in your classroom prior to the teaching experience that they'll have. And then after the observation, we expect them to develop and teach 3 lessons in your classroom. What the student's responsible for is, of course, the 6 hours of observation. They coordinate that with you. You'll help them with that, but they're responsible for doing it. You are not. They need to take the initiative on that. They need to communicate with you. They need to lead in communication. That shouldn't be initiated by you, should be initiated by them. They have to develop lessons using topics that you will assign to them or you'll help them pick. Sometimes mentors let them pick topics. It's really easier if you help them or kind of guide them in topic selection. We don't expect you to go out of your course sequence. Stay within your sequence of instruction. It's a really good experience for them. And it's easier for them to kind of have an assigned topic at an assigned level and know the level that they need to present at. Because they don't know your students well. If they just design something from scratch out of the blue, it's likely to miss the appropriate level. So it's good that you help them with this. They're expected to communicate with both mentor and master teachers, you being the mentor, the master teacher being the one from our program that they work with. They lead in that communication. The expectation is that they take the leading role. They, of course, teach 3 lessons in your classroom. They're going to teach with a partner, so you'll work with a pair of students. The lessons can be spaced out over a course of 2, 3, 4 weeks. They can be taught on 2, 3, 4 consecutive days. They could teach the same lesson twice in one day, and this is actually a good realistic teaching experience that we encourage. So they teach a lesson, you give them some feedback, they make some minor adjustments, and they teach the lesson again to the next class coming in. If they do this, then they can actually fulfill the requirement over 2 days, where they really teach the lesson 4 times, but they only have to develop 2 lessons. So it's kind of an intermediary. If they space them out, then they have to develop and teach 3 separate lessons. So this is kind of a compromise we make if they want to do multiple lessons in one day. They have to video one of the lessons. This is important for you to know, because sometimes you have to help them with getting the permission to video in the classroom, or making sure there's permissions in place in your classroom for videoing. And if there are any students who can't be videoed, of course, we need you to communicate that with them, and we need to figure out how to make sure they're not in the videos of the lessons. One of the big assignments of the course is they do a long reflective paper where they take this video, they evaluate themselves according to the Class S system that we've trained them in, and they kind of look at where they're strong, where they need improvement, and they write a reflection on this. So it's a really powerful learning tool that comes from classroom interactions. What's expected of you, or what we need you to do in this process, is, of course, set up an initial meeting. They actually initiate the communication. You shouldn't have to do that. They should be reaching out to you to set up this initial meeting. During the initial meeting, you try to set up the time for them to come in and observe. You pick the class that they're going to come be visiting. Ideally, they observe in the classroom that they're going to be teaching in, so that they become familiar with the students become familiar with them, and you set up communication expectations. Just exchange emails or phone numbers, however you want them to communicate with you. Also give them ideas of the time of day that's best to communicate with you. If you can, at this initial meeting, set up initial topics. Usually this isn't the time that this can happen, because no teacher knows exactly where they're going to be on a particular day. Usually, so that can come later, but maybe a discussion of where you think you'll be about the time they'll be coming in to do their teaching. Then you facilitate the observation. If there are things they need to overcome to get into your building, like background check within the district, or how they need to sign into the systems, help them navigate that. All of our students have been background checked through the Colorado Department of Education, so they've already been through that level of vetting. And then, of course, you'll provide the lesson topics as they come up. And if you can do that in the initial meeting, great. If not, just when the timing is right, provide the lesson topics. You'll assist as they develop lessons. They completely develop them on their own, but they're to communicate with you back and forth as they design the lesson, so you can give them feedback. And then provide them feedback after each teaching session that they come in and do. Ideally, this could happen in person right after. We know that a lot of times mentors have classes right after the classes that they come in and teach, so that can happen, and if it can't, that's fine. Maybe you could Zoom with them later, or at least send an email with some feedback on how they did. We can provide feedback forms if you need those. We'll actually give you a copy of the observation form that we use. A master teacher will also come in and observe when they do their live teaching and give them feedback as well, but your feedback is much more valuable to them, because you are the practicing teacher who's still doing it, who is the expert. So they really crave that information, that feedback from you. Again, we'll provide feedback as well, but yours is equally important, actually more important. So we'll provide you the forms that we use. You do not have to use them by any means. A lot of our mentors will just jot down notes on a piece of paper and talk to them about them, or give them to them, email them the response. Anything you choose to do is fine. What I try to tell mentors is they're just teachers in training, so find 1 or 2, maybe 3 things that they could work on to present to them. There's going to be 10 things they could work on, but that'll be overwhelming if you go through all of those. So pick 2 or 3 really important things for them to work on between each teach, and then of course assess afterwards to see if they've improved. And that's enough. Just give them some feedback, and of course give them some positives when you can. And the students, by the time they're in CI, they have some experience and they're getting pretty good. So you'll have some positive feedback for them, I'm certain. And then we expect you, if there are any issues that you see among the teaching pairs, if they're not communicating with you, if you see one student who's carrying the load and the other's not really doing much of anything, communicate those things with us. We will mitigate those issues. We don't expect that of you. We just ask you to tell us when you see those things happen, and we'll help resolve them. From us, you can expect that we will also be helping the students with their lesson planning. We yield to your advice over ours. So if we've given them some advice and you give them advice that's slightly different, we say take the mentor's advice, because you know your students better, you know your content better than us. We will come in and observe when they do their live teaching. It's really fun if the mentor teacher and the master teacher sit together during these observations and talk about it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. A lot of that's up to you. If you want to pair with us and kind of have conversation about what's going on, that's usually powerful. It's a little bit of professional development for the both of us too, if we do it that way. We will also give some feedback to the student teachers eventually. Of course, we communicate. We're the liaison between mentor teachers and the students if that becomes necessary. If they're not communicating with you, we'll help resolve that issue and get them in touch with you. And just to reiterate, if there are any issues that occur with the teaching pairs or between them and you, let us know. We'll take care of that stuff. A successful experience, successful teaching placement in CI would be completion of the observation hours prior to the teaches. 3 well-developed lesson plans is an expectation for a successful experience. If they've had you helping them, if they've had us helping them, then they should develop a good lesson plan. 3 teaches where they exhibit good effort. We don't expect the teachers to be anywhere near perfect. They're just in training, but we do expect a perfect effort. So they show up not just on time, they show up early, they're prepared, they're dressed well. The expectation is that they dress like a teacher. So help us communicate to them what that expectation is in your building, and we'll reinforce that on our end. But so all of that exhibits good effort. Obviously, the teachers aren't going to be perfect, and that's not the root of their grade in this class anyway, because they're just in training. Good communication should be an expectation, and successful field placements occur when there's good communication. When there's lack of good communication, they don't. So again, if that becomes an issue, let us know. We'll help you work that out. And then a successful field placement usually happens when there's good teamwork among teaching pairs. That's pretty much it. We'll provide you with a lot of resources, documentation, a handbook along the way. We're always available. You'll have whichever master teacher you work with, you'll have our information, our contact information, so that you know how to get a hold of us when you need to. There's also a stipend. I think that hasn't been mentioned yet, but you get a $125 stipend for working with a pair of our students, paid at the end of the semester. So not much, but at least it's something. Really want to thank you for considering working with our students. You're an important part of our program, probably the most important part. It's really exciting for the students to get out and work with real teachers, as they call them. And in our vision too, that's the most important part. You're the ones in the field. Your practices are current. You're working with real kids and in a real classroom with real dynamics. So such a valuable part of our program. We really appreciate your willingness to be a part of it, and wish you the best of luck this semester with your teaching partners.